Starting a recording, you may get a message now. And I'm going to take away everyone but our current talking presenters. Okay. So welcome everyone to our webinar today. Peggy, I'm going to unmute you and you can take it away. Or Shelby.
Okay. Are we all set?
Yes.
Yep,
You
go
can
ahead.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes,
okay,
we can.
Wonderful, thank you. Sorry, I can't attend, to see you folks, but as long as you can hear me, I just want to say thanks for joining us today in what has been a wonderful webinar series. We are so thankful to Peggy for reaching out to us and for connecting with Katie to make this thing happen. It's just been fabulous, and I'm so very thankful for all that are on today. The feedback has just been wonderful, and I just can't say enough about how well received this is. It's so time that we're all in. So thanks again for the sponsors, and especially to Peggy for making this happen for us. And again, we just appreciate that you're with us today.
What do we, Mom?
Okay, this is Dr. Whitby. I'm from the University of Arkansas in Fayetteville, and I want to welcome you to today's webinar. This is a partnership with the Center for Exceptional Families. Katie, can you move to the next slide, please? We are fortunate across the state of Arkansas to have really fabulous partners who are supporting the Center for Families and have supported us with our webinar series. These agencies and universities have spread the word across the state about these webinars and the great work that our Center for Exceptional Families are doing. Today's webinar is going to be on managing behavior and discipline. And we have two really great presenters that are with us today that will be focusing on managing problem behavior and discipline. Our first presenter today is Dr. Tracy McKinney. Dr. McKinney is from Georgia State University. She is a board certified behavior analyst, and she is an expert kind of at looking at behavior through a cultural and family lens. And so she brings to us kind of her unique perspective of really how to look at behavior through cultural competency. So let's go ahead and introduce, turn it over to Dr. McKinney.
Hi, everybody. I hope you're safe and I hope you're well and not going to stir crazy in this interesting time that we're in. So like Dr. Whitby said, I work at Georgia State University, and my work there focuses around preparing students to be special education teachers and also preparing general ed teachers to learn how to work with kids with disabilities, because they're probably going to be in their classroom at some point in their career. And so also, as Dr. Whitby said, I am a behavior analyst, and so I've been working with behaviors for a long time. My favorite part of my job, the favorite part of my job is supervising students in field and helping them try to find strategies to work with the behaviors of their students. And truth be told, as I work with the students and we work on their teaching interventions, a lot of times those behaviors that they're struggling with disappear. So that's certainly a part that we need to, wait, let me share my screen. That's a part that we'll certainly need to address. There we go. Okay, so today we're going to talk briefly about A, B, C as it relates to managing behavior. So we'll look at scenarios where using ABC is beneficial. And we'll lastly talk about prevention as it relates to managing behavior. So does anybody know what ABC stands for when we're talking about behaviors? You can type it in your chat box. I see one. Yes, okay. Wonderful. I think we've got some people who could pop on with me and co-present this, huh? All right. So okay. So we often think that behaviors just happen, but that's rarely the case. When we usually don't see a rhyme or a reason, and sometimes we think that our kids are just being bad. And now labeling a kid as just being bad is a lecture for a whole other day, and I'd be happy to come back and talk about that. But we think that kids are just displaying undesirable behavior for no reason, and that's usually not the case. Behaviors usually happen for a specific reason. And ABC, those are the letters that you'll need to remember to help you as you try to analyze what's happening with your kids and their behaviors, okay? So as several people mentioned, A is for antecedent, and that's exactly before the behavior, okay? So the behavior will happen, and then you'll have to think back like, okay, what happened right before this? You know, did we just have science? Did we just have math? Did I just make corn for dinner? Like, you'll just have to think about what just happened before the behavior occurred. B is for behavior, and that's the actual thing that happened. So what are some of the behaviors that you're seeing at home? Think about that for a second. What are some of the behaviors that you're seeing at home among your kids? You know, are they hitting siblings? Are they hitting the parents? Are they hitting other family members? Are they throwing their toys? You know, what are some things that we're seeing at home? Okay. So those are the behaviors, all right? Those are the behaviors, and that's what B stands for. So C is for consequence, and that's what happens immediately after the behavior. What did the parents do? You know, did you yell? Did you send them to their room? Did you swat them? Those are consequences, okay? So remember, A is for antecedent, B, behavior, and C, consequence. All right, so here's a sample of a sheet that will help you determine why the behavior is happening. Okay, so we're gonna look a little more closely at the sheet in the next few slides. So take a look at this incident. Okay, now this one. Now, as you look at this one, start thinking about patterns that may be showing up here. All right, so what do you notice now that we've got all of this laid out? What patterns do you notice here? Act somebody's being told what to do, okay. Undesirable tasks, time of day. Uh-huh. Good, 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 good. Okay, so each of these instances are happening right around the same time. You guys are right on point with that. So think of, a lot of times parents think that they're punishing their kids for behaviors, but the behavior is continuing. So if the behavior continues to happen day after day after day, or time after time after time, then it's not punishment. It's actually reinforcing it somehow, because reinforcement increases the likelihood that the behavior is going to continue to happen. Punishment extinguishes the behavior. It doesn't happen. So you think you're punishing your child by saying, go to your room. But if it's continuing, you're really not. A lot of times we're just, it's sending them to the room gives us a time, some time to have a break, which is absolutely fine. But it just may not be having the effect on the behavior that you want. So based on this data sheet, we can assume that the purpose of this child's undesirable behavior is probably to have a nap. And perhaps he just doesn't have the words to say, I'm exhausted, I need a nap, or he just may not be able to recognize that he needs a nap. So think about this and think about patterns in your children's behavior. And let me just say, they're rarely just trying to get under your skin. Their behavior usually has a purpose. And we as parents and as teachers have to think a little harder sometimes to figure out what those purposes are. So let's imagine that you've been working 6 days straight during this time of COVID. And every time when you get home, you're exhausted. You've been working 12 hours, you're tired, you're hungry, you just want to veg out. But your child wants to play. He wants your attention. He wants to read a book. He wants to, snuggle up and watch TV with you, and you just need a break. So he tries to do all these things, and you're like, no, I don't want to. No, I'm tired. No, get away, get away, get away. And finally, he goes to the other room, and he, throws something across the room, or he hits his sister, or he kicks the cat. And then you're like, that's it, go to your room. And you yell and scream, send him to his room. And perhaps your child knows that this is a bit of a pattern. He'll do something wrong, you'll yell at him, send him to his room. But at the end, you come in, you have a conversation, you snuggle a little bit, you hug, and you kiss. And so the child is like, I want attention. I need a hug. I need a kiss. I need some attention. I'm just going to do all of these behaviors. First he did some appropriate things, and then he said, well, that didn't work. I know she always yells and screams, when I hit my sister, so I'm going to do that. And then after all the behavior, after all of the things that she gives me that I don't want, the yelling, the screaming, the sending to my room, I still get what I really want, which is that hug and kiss. So it's worth it. So again, we really have to think about, what our kids are craving, and what they're really telling us when they're kicking the cat. All right. So once you're able to document behaviors and incidents and determine why a behavior might be happening or why a child might be behaving in a particular way, what the antecedent is, then you can really work to prevent the behavior. Prevention is one of the best ways to manage behavior. Remember, I talked about briefly earlier when I'm working with teachers in the classroom about behaviors and teaching strategies. When we edit those teaching strategies and make them more meaningful, maybe we make them more complicated, maybe we make them easier to understand, then behaviors decrease oftentimes. So if we can do that in our house, then that might help decrease the undesirable behaviors. So if we know, like just this morning as I was getting prepared, I was kind of getting snippy with my daughter, and she was just asking questions, trying to get her work done. And I was like, oh, I gotta do this, I'm busy. And then I was like, oh wait, I'm hungry. Let me go eat because I'm getting really hangry. So if we know that our kids get hangry, they get really snippy and fussy when they're hungry or when they're tired, then we can help combat this and prevent some of these behaviors. So the slide that you're looking at right now are just a couple of organizational things that I found. There's a zillion online if you look. But these are, I know a lot of things circle around hunger. And so if you want to organize some food in daily bins, so on Monday you present this to your child and say, okay, here's your snack for Monday. If you eat it all by 10 a.m., you're done. you're done. So you need to ration it out. So you can have all the snacks for each day in a bin. And then, they can go in and grab it when they're hungry, and that can kind of help defeat some of that hangry behavior. If you have a child who can't quite regulate a whole day, so maybe you have a Monday morning box and then you have a Monday afternoon box. That way, they can eat all of Monday morning until 12, and then they've got the next box for the afternoon. You could also do this for activities to kind of combat the boredom behavior. So maybe a Monday, or you don't even label the boxes. Maybe you've just got 5 boxes and you say, these are all of your activities that you can work on. And when they're getting a little whiny, getting a little antsy, a little bored, you can say, hey, go grab a box. Or you grab the box and say, hey, look, let's see what's in this mystery activity box. So those are just a couple of ways to help get your kids engaged and to help fight the boredom behavior and behavior that's associated around meal times. Oh, and also, if you have ever had an interest in signing up for one of those book activity box of the month club or whatever, I think one is called Kiwi. I would encourage you to look into that kind of thing now. And basically they send a box of goodies, and usually they have everything included to create a science activity or a math activity or just some type of learning activity. And so I encourage you to look into that now. Lots and lots and lots of these companies are having amazing sales, and they're giving big discounts because they know we're all at home. And even if there's a company who's not offering a discount, I would encourage you to call them and say, hey, can I have a discount because of COVID? And a lot of them are being very gracious during this time. So I would encourage you to do that. Okay, so I know that was super fast. In review, remember that you're going to write down exactly what happens during the last episode of Undesirable Behavior. Even if you don't think it's related, you may think it's completely ridiculous that it can be related. And then once you've gotten it all written down, you can say, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happens every Tuesday. So it's really amazing what we can find out when we document things. Once you know the pattern and you've discovered why behavior might be happening, then you can work to find strategies and to prevent the undesirable behavior. Okay, so I've listed a few resources. The first is a website where the young lady provides lots of resources for parents under her Caregivers Corner. She's actually quite easy to get in touch with. You can email her questions and she'll get back with you. The next website is a site where there are lots of webinars and seminars for parents and adults or professionals also. I've used this site a number of times when I need to get my professional development for my behavior analyst certificate. So it's certainly a reputable site, and I really would encourage you to take a look at their site. And then you've got local universities, Dr. Whitby connected with the center to get this webinar series going. So I would encourage you to reach out to your local universities if you have questions, if you need support. Oftentimes there are students who are doing research who need to work with families, and they're often looking for participants. And lastly, your local and your national support groups. Right now, everything's virtual, but at some point we'll be back face-to-face and you'll be able to connect with people. And even just on Facebook, if you want to keep it virtual, that's fine. There are 1,000,001 different Facebook groups. I didn't want to list them because they're very specific. So you may want to be in one that's specific to you or your geographic area. So that concludes my portion of the presentation, and I will take questions at the end. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. McKinney. We really appreciate having you with us today. Just a reminder, a lot of you have been putting questions into the chat box. We'll address a lot of those questions towards the end. Some of those questions you're putting in are pretty complex. I've already been reading some of them, and hopefully we'll be able to kind of connect you with resources if maybe your questions are too complex to be able to answer in a short webinar. Next, I'd like to introduce Dr. Lauren Quetch. Lauren is a professor at the University of Arkansas. She is in our psychology department, and her research and expertise is in the area of play and discipline and working with families. So without further ado, welcome Dr. Lauren Quetch.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here, and I am very excited to share a little bit of information with all of you as well. So like many of you, I'm at home currently with my 2 toddlers. Fingers crossed they stay asleep for the entire time that we're doing this. So I feel the struggle. I feel the pain that many of you feel. And we love our children, and it is very hard to manage all the responsibilities that we have right now, given that we're stuck at home. So I'm just gonna get my slides ready for you guys. All right, and then we'll get started. Okay, so as Dr. Whitby said, my name is Lauren Quetch. I am an assistant professor here at the University of Arkansas, and it is so hard for me to do multiple things at once. Here we go. All right. And I am in the Department of Psychological Science, and I'm going to be talking to you about discipline. So this is just a little bit of an outline of what we're going to be talking about, but I will go into each one of these topics in more detail. So just the first thing we're going to be talking about is recognizing when do we pick our battles when we're trying to decide what to do with discipline. The next is consistency. So how to be consistent, what does that look like? Alternatives to physical discipline, and then timeout. So before we get started, one of the first things I want to say is you can do this. It's hard, and I believe in you. You can do this. So we're going to talk about each of these things and what it looks like. Okay, so the first thing is pick your battles. Understanding what it means to follow through, when we should follow through, and when to let things go. We can't do everything. I know, we can't do everything. So a question that I get a lot is, what do I do? I know we're feeling stressed. I know it's difficult to try to understand how we handle these disruptive behaviors, and when is it okay to ignore it? Or is it even okay to ignore it? I think a lot of families that I talk to, when I tell them it's okay, you don't have to address it every single time, that sometimes blows their minds. So we come to a crossroads, right? A behavior happens, our child does something, whether it's screaming, throwing something, maybe you're at your wit's end too, but the idea is we have to decide, what are we gonna do in that moment? How are we gonna handle this? This is the consequence that Dr. McKinney was talking about, right? So first we have to decide, what is this behavior? Is it annoying or bothersome? And I'll talk about specifically what that is in a second. Or is it dangerous and destructive? So for annoying and bothersome, some examples include things like whining, yelling, throwing a tantrum, as my 3-year-old and 2-year-old are prone to do quite frequently. Also, taking your time, dragging their feet. You want to do something, you want to get it done, and they're just, it just feels like it's taking all your effort to get them to do something. So those are some examples of annoying and bothersome things that can happen. So before you decide how you're going to handle this or what you're going to do, you need to ask yourself, how do I feel? Check in with yourself for a moment. Have a sense of, where am I right now? How am I feeling? Do I feel capable of handling this calmly? I can tell you, I don't always feel calm. It might be the end of the day for me. It might be, they've been screaming all morning, right? So for me, sometimes it's, okay, check in with yourself. How am I feeling? And then, do I have enough energy to handle this? So if you say, I can do it, like, I feel good, I can do it, then maybe your decision is, I'm going to discipline this behavior, right? So if your kid has been screaming all day. They seem like they just want attention. They don't want to listen to anything that you have to say. Maybe it is, okay, I'm going to put my kid in their room for just a minute. I'm going to take a moment. They're going to take a moment, and we can reconnect and see if we can handle these things calmly once everybody's calmed down. Another thing might be, one of my personal favorites is timeout. So letting that child take a break in whether it's a chair, and I'll talk about that more specifically later on too, but again, putting them outside of what's going on, the commotion, the fun, the distractions, and just giving them a moment to relax. And then another option might be removing a privilege. So that might be something like you don't get to go outside until you have picked up the toys off the floor, or because you didn't pick up the toys off the floor, now you don't get to watch TV. So the idea is their behavior and what they do is connected to some sort of consequence that they enjoy. So that is one option, right? Now, we don't always feel like we're capable of handling things, right? I can't do this right now. I'm too tired. I'm too stressed. It has been a long day, and I just don't have the energy for it. There are a couple options that you can do in this time then. First, you are allowed to ignore. You can ignore this behavior. It does not have to be addressed. It doesn't have to be addressed every single time. In fact, what I recommend for people is distract. Like, you know, those little babies, and you wave things in their face, and it's like it's got a jingle, and it makes a lot of noise. That's what we're doing. We're just saying, you know what? I can't handle this, whatever is going on right now. I know you want a lollipop for a snack. You can't have that. You know what? Why don't we go color? Or let's go play with chalk outside. You know what? That might distract him enough. We're not going to handle that behavior. We just don't have the energy for it. Let's go do something else. So redirecting might work too. But understanding that we don't have to address this every single time, especially if you just feel like you can't. So that's annoying and bothersome. So what do we do then if it's dangerous or destructive? So examples are like hitting, kicking, biting, breaking things. Unfortunately, these should always be addressed. So in order to address it, we should ask ourselves, how do I make sure I'm calm and composed when this is going on? So I do this all the time. I practice this all the time. You got to do some deep breathing. So this is, you know, just take a moment, and we can even practice this together right now. Just take a moment to center yourself and think of, okay, I'm going to just get some oxygen into my body. I'm going to slow my body down, and it might be taking a deep breath in for 3 seconds and then breathing out for 3 to 4 seconds when you do it too. So you're just taking a moment, taking a pause, saying, again, checking in with yourself. How do I feel? I'm going to handle this. I got this. Being confident in yourself. And then create a routine and stick to it. So if you've decided, you know, my child hits quite a lot and it's unacceptable, maybe they're hitting their sibling, there's a couple options. You can either, if they're using a toy, then you can just remove the toy. Or if that child is hitting and not stopping, maybe remove them from the room, but being consistent with it. And the idea is, you know what, when this behavior happens, this is what I'm going to do. And then they can come to expect it. It's a routine. They understand, if I do this, then this happens. Also understanding, you know, sometimes we're just tired, and while we need to address this, we never want to put yourself or your child in danger. But if you need help figuring out, do you have a spouse? Do you have a partner? Do you have another adult that you could ask? And understanding we all need help. None of us are islands. And so how do we get the assistance we need if we really feel like we're struggling with following through with some of these destructive behaviors? We need help. I need help. I think we all need help. And make sure that all the adults that are implementing discipline are on the same page. So we don't want one person letting things go and then another person being very firm with how they're handling things, because the child will learn that they can kind of get away with stuff with certain people. So making sure that we're consistent, which brings us to our next topic, consistency. So my analogy here that I want you to think about is a rubber band versus a brick wall. And so asking yourself, what's a rubber band? Am I a rubber band? The idea is sometimes what happens is we bend and flex. So just imagine the rubber band, right? We bend and flex depending on the mood that we're in. And so maybe for a certain behavior that your child demonstrates, you're calm versus you're upset, or you follow through versus you let it go. And so if we have these extremes in our responses to our child's behavior, what ends up happening is the child sort of feels uneasy because they don't know what to expect. Sometimes they get away with it, so maybe they try to figure out how to keep trying until they can get away with that behavior that they want to do. And other times, if you're very calm and collected, then that can create a sense of calm with your child. But if we're all over the place and we're not consistent, it can be very unsettling for kids. So then the next question is brick wall. What is it? How do I become it? Am I a brick wall? So I would say, I said always, but like majority of the time, no one's perfect, right? You're calm, you follow through, and you try to be consistent as much as possible. So I'm going to tell you, again, like I said, no one's perfect. But you know, there are days that if my child wants to have cereal for dinner, fine, let it be that, because that's about all I can muster, right? But knowing that you're trying and you're making an effort, and as long as you're generally consistent, that is the goal. It's a great goal to have. Doesn't mean that every single moment that we have that opportunity, we're perfect, because no one's perfect. But just as much as possible, trying to be consistent. Okay. And then remembering that if we decide to stick to our guns and we're going to try a new discipline behavior, we need to either go all the way, meaning if my child is throwing a tantrum and I give up 20 minutes into the tantrum and I say, whatever, you can have all the ice cream you want, I just can't anymore. They've learned that if I just keep fighting and throwing a big tantrum, I can get what I want. So either we need to say, no, we are going to see this tantrum through, and we're going to be consistent and follow through and make sure we're not just caving. Or if you've checked in with yourself and you're like, I just can't today, give in right away and just say, you know what? I'm not going to fight you on the cereal for dinner, have it. Because if we give in right away, that teaches, they're not learning this destructive behavior to get what they want. They've just learned mommy's not feeling good right now. And that's okay. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is alternatives to physical discipline. So how can we be a strong parent and be the person that we want to be while remaining calm? And so a lot of times I hear when families come in, they say things to me like, my child needs to show me respect. I can't let my child get away with this. My child's behavior is embarrassing. If I don't address it, then I look like a bad parent. Or they might say things like, I was whooped as a child and I turned out okay. And so I want, for families that have frequently used either physical discipline as the primary method or even as a last sort of like, I don't know what else to do, this is how I'm going to handle it. These are the things I want you to consider about that. So first, understanding that our mood impacts how we perceive the world and how we respond to it. And when we're stressed, especially in times like these when we are very stressed, we can have bigger emotional and physical reactions than we intend to. And so we might feel guilty later on if we do something that we didn't mean to do. But it can actually increase the response that we have in a way that maybe isn't as beneficial as we hoped. So some effects on the parent-child relationship include, for families that do use physical discipline, that's been shown in the research, that children oftentimes end up being more disrespectful, more avoidant of their parents, and less responsive when parents are actually trying to display appropriate responses to their child. So when they say, this is how you behave properly, the kid's not going to listen as much, unfortunately. Long-term outcomes include such things as more problem behavior and more demonstration of calm behaviors in the children and not less. And also a last important thing to think about is this teaches our children that we use force when we're frustrated. So we're modeling this inappropriate behavior sometimes. So we were like, we don't want our kids to hit, but it's okay for us to do that. And so thinking about how do we want to present ourselves as parents? Who do we want our children to be? And even if you felt like this was an effective method for yourself, everybody has different strengths, everybody has different vulnerabilities, and just because it worked for somebody doesn't mean that it's going to work for everybody. So the last thing I want to talk about before I wrap up is timeout, my personal favorite. My kids know it, and I'm going to tell you about my own story in a second. But the idea is that we're taking a break from the fun, taking a break from all the commotion that's going on in our life, and we're just taking a pause. So I think a lot of people get confused. They say, I've tried timeout, it doesn't work. And so there are certain components that I think are essential in order to make sure that we're understanding what timeout actually is. So my example being, so we have a little timeout chair for our older girl, she's 3, and we have a little timeout square for our 2-year-old because he doesn't sit on the chair well. And the other day, my daughter and my son, I could hear him screaming in the other room. And my daughter all of a sudden stopped, walked out of the room, I can't believe this happened, and went to the timeout chair and sat herself down. And my husband said, what happened? What are you doing? She goes, I was mean to my brother. I need to sit in timeout. And I was just mind blown. That's never happened before. And so I was like, oh, something's working, something's sinking in. But she was able to check in with herself and realize something was not right. Her behavior was not right. We didn't even have to reprimand. So hopefully for myself, it just shows that like sometimes parenting does work. Things do sink in with our kids. But if we're consistent and we use timeout quite frequently with our kids, then understanding that they're going to know what to expect. It's going to be less scary because it's consistent. It's sort of a schedule. It's a routine. And so they understand, oh, I didn't listen, I didn't follow the rules, and now I have to sit in timeout for a moment. So if you do a command, especially if it's really important. Now, I'm not saying that you do this with every command because no one is, a superhuman and can do timeout all the time. It would be exhausting. But the idea is if this is really important, it's one of those behaviors that really needs to be addressed. Or you're like, I've told my kid 1,000,000 times to do this and I haven't done it. There needs to be a consequence for it. If you've given a command, something like, please pick up that toy off the floor, and they haven't followed through, maybe you've told them a couple times, if you don't pick up the toy off the floor, you're going to have to sit in the timeout chair, and they still don't do it, go ahead and place them in timeout. So a safe timeout looks like a wooden chair, something sturdy that's not going to fall over easily, usually without handles, because sometimes kids will stick their arms or their feet through it. But if you don't have that, just do what I do, and I put some tape on my floor and I say, sit there, or you put a handkerchief on the floor, and that'll work just fine too. So just as long as it's a designated spot. And then make sure it's in a quiet place. So without distractions, away from TV. It's not supposed to be fun. The idea is I need a moment to step back out of all this chaos to calm down. And it's not going to help the child to calm down if there's a lot of attention given to the child, if you're looking at the child, talking to the child, they're watching TV, there's a lot of commotion. The idea is let me take a moment to be at peace with myself, by myself, in a chair or on the ground or whatever it needs to be. And then there are different recommendations for this. Honestly, I've seen huge effects for kids if you have them sit in a timeout chair between 1 and 3 minutes. So for example, if your child has ADHD or can't sit still for longer than a minute, asking them to sit in timeout for longer than a minute is an unfair ask. So if your child developmentally can't do it, then don't shoot for 3 minutes. Say, I think my kid can sit for about a minute at a time calmly. That's what I'm going to shoot for. But if your child is capable for sitting for long periods of time, 3 minutes is perfectly acceptable and is very effective. You don't have to go really, really long either. But the important component of this then too is that there's 5 seconds of silence. So they need to have been able to calm down and show that they're going to be able to do what you've asked them to do before you ask them if they're ready to get out of that chair. But if that child is too upset, unable to stay seated, is trying to get out, is throwing a fit and won't sit down, then what I say is go ahead and bring them to a safe room. Make sure there's nothing that they can destroy in that room. If they've got their own room, that's ideal. If not, figure out a way. Let's remove all things that they've potentially might break or might hurt themselves with, and let them just be in that room calmly for about a minute, and making sure again that they've been quiet for about 5 seconds. Because if you try to go in there while Tasmanian devil's going around, it's not going to be effective, right? You got to wait until they're calm. And then once they're done and they've been calm, you return them to that timeout chair again, making sure that it's sort of like you're going up a ladder. You've got your command, they got to listen to it. If they can't do that, they got to go to timeout. If they can't do that, they go to their room for a little bit, and then they come back to the timeout chair. And then the idea is at the very end, they're going to do that original command that you've asked them to do. So they can't escape with all of that. They still got to come back, and they still got to hand you that block or that toy that you asked them to pick up at the very end. And that's about it. So I appreciate you guys. I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you have. I know you can do it. I know it's hard. There are days that are harder than others, believe me. But if you follow these things and you try to be as consistent as possible, I think good things will happen.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Quetch. We're going to go ahead and do some questions and answers. We've had a lot of questions in the chat room while both the presenters were talking. And some of the questions that we put down were quite specific to certain situations. Some people, are struggling with very, very severe behaviors. Others with, just trying to manage everyday child routines. One of the questions that we had for Dr. Quetch was, just let me go back up here, because again, like I said, there's a lot of them. Do you think, and actually Dr. Quetch or Tracy could answer this one, but do you think that we would address these behaviors the same way for both children with and without disabilities? Or do you think maybe there might be some differences in how we would address these with kids who have disabilities?
Oh, that's a loaded question. I think there are some similarities. It depends on the level of disability. It depends on the age of the child. It depends on their functioning, right? So, and every child is different. So one of the first things I think about, for example, is if you have a child that has a lot of self-harm behavior, you're going to want to do a lot of preventive measures and making sure that the child is safe. If you know placing them in a room by themselves, they're going to harm themselves or break, furniture or anything like that. So one of the things I talked about was the shortened timeout periods. If your child is incapable of doing that or even sitting still for a minute, then you need to consider what is going to be more effective. So ABA services oftentimes will teach a child how to comply over time. So it might be that there is more involved in teaching them how to just follow an instruction rather than assuming they can do it and then following through with this big timeout. And there are other factors too, understanding the difference between a tantrum and a meltdown. So a tantrum being, you know what, you told me to do something and I don't feel like doing it. And a meltdown being, I'm overstimulated, I'm overwhelmed, and really what I need is a big hug and a rock. I don't need to have this big, discipline procedure. And so, yes, I think it is very important to consider those things, and you of anybody else are going to know your child best. So if you are having a lot of issues with destructive behavior or concerning behavior, I highly recommend talking to a specialist who can work with you, because I never want to put you in a situation where yourself or your child is going to harm themselves or harm somebody else. But if your child is generally capable of following through with things and sitting by themselves for a short period of time, every child is going to get upset when you tell them they can't do what they want to do. It's just a matter of what are they capable of handling.
Mhm.
That was my short and long answer.
It's okay. One of the other comments, kind of questions of the thread was that we have a preschool teacher that was told that they shouldn't use timeout because that was singling out the child. How do you feel about that kind of in a small group setting? How can we use timeout effectively in a classroom setting?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think there are a lot of myths that surround timeout. People believe that it is punishing, that it shames children. Others feel that it's traumatizing for the child to sit alone. And I encourage people to think about what timeout actually is versus what stigma that we place on it. So when I'm angry and I'm upset, I know that sometimes I need to take a walk away from my husband so that I can cool down. And so that is my ability to emotionally regulate. If we do not teach our children how to regulate their emotions, they become adolescents that we can't easily pick up anymore. Or they become adults that when they get angry, they just yell and scream. There's some adults that you see that this is the case, and walking around in day to day too. And we're never taught how to regulate their emotions, right? So within a classroom setting, I think if you talk to the children, and you're not saying like, you're bad. That's not the idea. Say, oh, please pick this up, or remember the rule in our classroom is we don't hit our friends. So now we just have to sit in the corner until we calm down. And, the kids, sometimes the first few times they go through it, they cry, they don't know how to regulate those emotions. And then like what happens with my kids too, is now they sit in that chair and they're like, yeah, I got to sit here until I'm calm. And then they come back and they're able to do it. So I think part of it is framing it a certain way, not saying that there's something wrong with the child, because there's nothing, like what Dr. McKinney was saying, no child is bad. We can love children and we cannot love a behavior, and we're not going to allow the child to hit. But then what's the alternative if we're not letting our children calm down in a way that's healthy? I think the concern is that it's also the alternatives could be problematic or not address the issue.
Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes too, if you work with behavior analysts or if you're working with very specific behavior intervention planning, we might use other consequences other than timeout. For example, if our function of the behavior is escape and we're using timeout, it could backfire on us. So some of you may have been told, in this situation, please do this versus timeout.
Absolutely. And timeout's not the end all be all either. But yeah, there's other alternatives.
The next question, and Tracy, I'm going to ask you to jump in on this one because I know you have older children. But one of the questions is, with our older children, our teenage children, we're generally not using timeouts anymore. What are some of those strategies that you're using to address some of the behaviors for older children?
The old school token economy, earning things. Oh, sorry, you didn't get your token today, or you didn't earn your dollar today, or, whatever it is they're working towards. Those kinds of reinforcers are really working for the older kids that I'm working with.
Now, I've seen one where they've actually put like a list on the fridge, and each activity they do earn so many minutes on the computer until they earn all their minutes for the day. That's one I really like. I've seen other people do, the chores, and then there's, if they earn allowance, they have a piece of, it earns so much of their allowance. And so that would be very much like a token system, but broken down more for the home. Any other ideas, Dr. McKinney and Dr. Quach?
I think those are great ideas. It's always important too that you never just use discipline alone. You have to make your environment happy and reinforcing. So the token economy is a great example of, you've done the chores that I asked you to do today, or you've done the activities I've asked you to do today. You earn these rewards too, or even just giving your child praise. I praise the heck out of my kids when they are playing nicely with each other, in the hopes that they will realize I give lots of positive attention when they're doing good things too. And so I'm not just reprimanding them all the time. I'm recognizing all the little things that they do right. And so discipline is ineffective if we don't have that positive relationship and those positive things that are happening too.
This is a question for Dr. McKinney. If your child or a kid is hitting or kicking, pushing staff, what do you do at the moment? How do you handle that at the moment?
Well, in the moment, you want to make sure that your staff, yourself, the child, and other kids in the room are safe. If a child is extremely aggressive and there are other kids in the classroom and I'm worried about their safety, if this has happened in the past, then usually we have some type of plan where, you know, okay, if he starts throwing things or if he starts hitting, everybody gets out of the classroom. So the para will go, you know, and take all the other kids out of the classroom. And
How about, Tracy, I'm going to ask you to address that kind of at home. At home, how would a mom address that who has 4 kids and one who is hitting and kicking and pushing, and she might be the only person in the home?
Right. So then she's going to have all the kids leave the room. Like maybe all the kids go to one other room while she addresses the behavior with the child who is displaying the aggressive behavior. That way, all the other kids are safe. Yeah, he might, you know, break a vase or knock over a flower pot, but it's certainly less detrimental than, you know, giving your sister a black eye. So I think keeping everybody safe is going to be the most important thing in the moment.
So in the moment, then I would probably have my other children go to another room and then just block the responses.
Yes. Yeah. Block, keep yourself safe, keep him as safe as possible.
And then very calmly redirect them to, you know, when we calm down, we can do this, or redirect them to the next activity.
Right. Kind of like Dr. Quetch was saying, like dangle something shiny and exciting once they get calm.
Okay. Let me go through.
I want to throw one other thing in about timeout. I know a lot of people just kind of get all glazed, you know, their eyes get glazed and they roll their eyes, timeout, you know. But I think a lot of times when we reframe it as, you know, go take some time away. I need some time apart. Like I tell my daughter that all the time, we need some time away from each other. Let's separate. So it's not like, you know, okay, I got to go sit in the bad girl chair. It's like, oh, I need to go and reflect. I'm going to grab my journal and just take some time apart, take a breather, take a beat. So I think if people kind of think of it in that way as well, that would be helpful too, and more palatable, I guess.
Dr. McKinney, I have another kind of question for you, and this would be for a parent in the home. In the moment, how should a parent handle a child that hits himself, that is self-injurious?
Blocking at home as much as possible. I've seen kids, you know, pick their skin or bang their head, and in those instances, it was rarely the first time. So we would always have like a helmet or like the not shin guards, but you know, like the for martial arts, arm guards.
Yeah.
For martial arts, they'd have those, and as soon as that behavior started, you throw that on. So if this is happening in the home and you don't have those type of protective gears, and it's happening pretty frequently, I would encourage you to hop on Amazon and order those kinds of things so that you're prepared.
What I would do with that, and I'm just going to kind of step in with that, is, you know, in that moment, I want you to use response, blocking, and redirection. And so you're going to very, very calmly just block the child from doing the behavior and try to redirect them from something else. It's not an easy behavior to work with. And if you have a child who is doing self-injurious behaviors, or a child who is very destructive or, you know, hurting themselves or others, I want you to reach out for help. this is not the time where we try to do it ourselves. And it is a very frustrating time because many of us, we rely on our schools for this level of support. And we rely on, whether the behavior analyst at the school, the speech therapist, the teacher, they're the people that have been giving us the support. And now all of a sudden, they're somewhat gone. And so it's a very, very challenging time for us. And that's going to lead me right to the next to the next slide, Katie, or is it the last slide? Oh, next slide. One more, Katie. One more. There. So if you have a child who is exhibiting these type of behaviors and you're struggling with these in the home right now, I want you to reach out. This is the time where I want you to reach out to your parent mentors to talk to them and try to get some support, extra support that you may need. There are some services out there that many times families don't even realize they have access. Every child who is served through disability has a case manager at the Department of Health and Human Services, and your parent mentor could help you find out who that person is and reach out. Some families can receive respite, and many families don't know that they have that as a possibility. But it might be hard to find that respite person right now, but I know that there's families out there right now who really need that respite service. If you have a child with autism, and it sounded like some of the questions that people were putting into the chat room were regarding children with more significant disabilities and with autism. If you have a child with autism through our state Medicaid plan, you can receive applied behavior analysis services in the home up to the age of 21. If your child has the diagnosis of autism. So possibly the parent mentors can put you in touch with the people you need to talk with about getting those services going for you. Again, it might be hard getting them going in the home right now, but I know the plan is allowing telehealth services at this time. And so even the telehealth support may be able to help you through this time of crisis. If you have a young child with autism, the autism waiver can provide autism in the home as well. I have one client that I'm working in Fort Smith now, and she's been having some significant behavior. She's an adult with Down syndrome. And at this time, because of her problems, the service provider is going to allow applied behavior analysis to come in and work with them so that they can support her in the community. She's on the waiver, the Medicaid waiver. And so there are some resources out there to help you. So I think this is really a great time for families to reach out to their parent mentors to try to get the support. Behavior and some of these significant behaviors that you're dealing with, there's no magic cure, there's no magic wand, and you're going to need help kind of navigating this so that your child can reach their full potential. I want to just take a moment again to thank everyone for being here today. This is not an easy topic. It's not an easy time for us as families. I want to thank our sponsors for reaching out across the state and serving families and people who have children with disabilities. These kind of are our people. These are the people that we care about and that we love. And so we really appreciate you. If you haven't had the opportunity to watch the first two webinars, please go ahead and visit our past webinars at the Center for Exceptional Families. And with that, we will end. If you have further questions, by all means, feel free to reach out to the Center for Exceptional Families, your parent mentors, and they will put you in touch with someone who can kind of help you navigate the situation that you're in. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for attending. Please let me know if you need a certificate of attendance by emailing katie.cravens@tsef.org, and that should be in an email to you shortly. Thank you, everyone.